I want to go college crossing.
I'm like, okay.
I went to college crossing. It's a lot smaller than.
What do you think?
It was like 8,000 there. I never did. I didn't never been on college. That's where I just wanted to go. Loved it.
Oh my gosh. What's in his bag? Didn't mean to throw that in there. My brain is all fried this morning.
Here, App State's like 18,000.
Well, we have the choice of doing that.
You go up there. And because it started off as such a
We did.
they don't have
Had
the
great
big
food.
and it's
Where my wife
like
came.
like his archaeology day.
Do you understand how that works?
I grew up and his
Right.
music appreciation is the biggest one because he goes to one of those core classes everybody has.
Was your wife a prop during her baby?
I don't feel like I'm discriminate.
Mine's the same way. You know, well, where do you? Because I'll eat anything. You know.
Yeah,
My
well,
wife was in
yeah,
spirit.
it cost cross and it was like,
It's amazing.
I was like, oh, get lost.
Tell me we got
That
it.
is.
There's a break right down the road. But I won't go there now. But she'll be back down here next week.
Yeah.
For some period of time, but I'll find out when she gets home probably. This approved, that's not bad, that must be
No, yeah, I lived on King Street the year I turned 21, across the street from my favorite bar.
they must be.
But thankfully, I was AC, and
My mom,
I could drink for free sometimes there, depending on who was there, you know, that kind of thing. But
there's others, but I tell her, hey, what?
but
First topic.
thankfully, I was in my major. By then, I was doing fine, knew what I was supposed to do, still
So
stayed
don't feel
focused.
bad. That is important.
Yeah, I couldn't afford to live on King Street anymore. That would have been. I think where my apartment is now is like the Williamson number or something below it.
Right,
My niece went there, marrying a citizen grad,
Call John Richards Mobile.
doing the typical college Charleston track.
watch.
Oh, yes. That is.
They still go out at 7 o'clock. I tried, I never took that. Always. So that's a. Fried fair, 8:30, 9 o'clock. Chairman starts. Trying to, I had to pay $600. And I never understood why they get super early fried out.
And that's a.
Yeah, I like. Yeah, that was 9 o'clock. Yep, can't start without one. Yeah. 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 He's awesome.
Good morning, folks. I know we've got 9 o'clock. I didn't give you a 2-minute warning, but we're going to take that 2 minutes now and get everybody find your seats, and we'll get started in just a couple minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I know.
By the way, I was in grad school.
Yes, I like them too. Yeah.
And then,
Oh, yeah. Amy, good?
And they're on time. Even though they are.
Oh, they have their own.
Good morning, sir.
Pledge.
You did good yesterday. We survived. Good meeting. Looking forward to a good meeting today. That is fine. Is there anything particular you want to do today? I'm going to remind everybody. We're pretty much done.
You can start. I didn't know if I had to be in the room.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of our full board meeting. Everybody have a good night? Hope you found something interesting to go do last night after our meeting. Charles had Greek food. I don't know about everybody else, but Charles had Greek food.
I went to a
Greek or
fabulous
great?
French restaurant.
Great.
Excellent.
Oh,
Just
my
sit
wife
outside
told me
there.
to.
So we got a couple things that we need to take care of today. We'll see how long it takes us to go through everything. I had built the agenda based off of how long Q&A normally lasts, even when we have all 25 members. I know we're down to 6, but I wanted to give you the opportunity to ask as many questions as you have. There's a lot going on with 235F and with the ACER today. So if we move quick, we might bump some things up. If we're running a little bit behind, that'll be okay too, because we have lots of time today to be able to take care of all of our business. The first things up is that 235F presentation that I was just telling you about. Before we begin, I was going to ask, Greg, do you have any opening comments that you'd like to make today?
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. I think we had a great, productive meeting yesterday, and I look forward to to wrapping it up today and having a good day with everybody. Thank you, James and staff, for running a good meeting.
Thank you, Greg. Anyone else around the table have any comments that you need to make this morning? Anything you'd like to say before we get started? All right, hearing none, let's start with our 235F presentation. We've got 3 presenters. I'm going to try to do this without setting off the feedback. We got 3 presenters today, Tony Gonzalez, Jeff Hasty, and then Brian Hennessy will be here virtually with us through Teams. It will give us the rundown on that. Let me give you guys a projector.
Okay.
Forward, backward, that's right.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Tony Gonzalez. With me is Jeff Hasty, and virtually is Brian Hennessy. We'll be presenting for 235F. Thank you all for giving us an opportunity to update you on the progress we made this year towards deactivation and decommissioning. It was with CAB's recommendation number 364 and the fall of 2019 that we started moving forward with 235F and trying to accelerate the progress on that. I'm still coming up to speed with all the history on 235F. I just joined the DOE in December of last year, so there's a lot of history to catch up on. Jeff Hasty will be providing an update on the deactivation, and then afterwards, Brian Hennessy will follow up with decommissioning. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Tony. So I am Jeff Hasty. I am the project manager at 235F. I've been associated with 235F since about 2013, which is about when the project started. Been on site 33 years, so I've had a lot of opportunities to serve in various capacities over them years. The 235F is, as you recall, we'll do a quick history on the buildings in case you're not familiar with it, and give you a status on where we're at. So we'll provide an update on the actions taken in the past year. And as Tony said, Brian will be joining us virtually to talk about the decommissioning aspect and where we're at in that process. So the building was constructed in 1954 as part of the original site construction. It's the same type structure as the canyons are. And through the years, it has several missions. It's used various processes. The last process, and probably the most significant process in that building, was the PUF facility, plutonium fuel, hard to say, plutonium fuel, I lost it, apologize, it's PUF. But we processed plutonium-238. It was used by NASA to power their deep space satellites. That process was shut down in the 80s. When the process was shut down, basically the building was walked away from. The ventilation was maintained in the building, but as far as actually going and cleaning it out, that did not take place at that time. At that time, the plan was to restart that process line, and that never happened. Around 2012, the Defense Board wrote a recommendation to the Department of Energy asking them to go in and clean up that material. At that time, there was a lot of, we believed a lot of material in the puff cells. The concern there was if we had an earthquake followed by a full facility fire, the dose to the co-located worker would be very significant, much more than a DOE standard. The DOE standard is 100 rem. We were in a magnitude somewhere around 22,000 rem based on the calculations at that time. So the department, they received that recommendation and they accepted that recommendation and developed an implementation plan. Implementation plan was how to address the issues there. And so in 2012, we initiated the risk reduction activities. In the major activities there, we electrically isolated the circuits in the building that were no longer needed. Again, trying to eliminate a fire. Removed combustible material in the building. Anything that could burn, we took out. Also, we installed a fire detection alarm system that gives an early indicator if there was a fire in the building. And then the biggest part of this risk reduction project was actually go into puff cells and remove the plutonium that was left behind. So in 2019, we actually started removing the material in puff cells 1 and 2. That's where the majority of the holdup was located at. I think some of y'all have actually been on site and seen some of this, but the puff cells, they're very large, very limited access into them. We were using general industrial techniques to remove the material. These operators who were doing this job, they were in several layers of PPE with lead aprons, multiple layers of gloves, fresh air hoods. It was extremely tedious and risky work, but they were making good progress there. We thought we were making good progress there in removing material. When we first started the project, our thoughts were as we removed the old material, you see the top picture there, some old canisters there that held plutonium. Our thoughts were we were removing a lot of plutonium as we took out the old pieces and parts of the process. What we learned is we were removing a lot of material, but we were not removing a lot of MAR. We were assaying the waste as it came out, and we're just not seeing a lot of holdup there. So the Department of Energy came back to us around July of 19 and said, you know, we're not getting there. This is not going to work for us. We need to find a better way of conquering this mission. So we went and revised at the IP, the implementation plan with the Defense Board. And basically we looked there, okay, how can we eliminate the fire in the facility? How can we make the facility safe? So we went down that process. We had an independent team come in and look at 235F and help us understand if the building would burn, how it would burn, what can we do to prevent it from burning. And they made some recommendations to us to go out and accomplish some of these things. So we went and did that. Part of that same process was revising our safety basis. That's where he looks at all the accidents that could happen and the consequences of them accidents. In May of 2020, that safety basis was implemented. Long story short on that is, it was determined that even if you had an earthquake, the building wouldn't burn. It's a concrete building. There's not much in it. It just would not burn. There's nothing there to sustain a fire. If you had to isolate a fire, it wouldn't get to the material at risk, the MAR, which was an area of concern there. We implemented our safety basis in May of 2020, and that closed the IP. That answered all the questions from the Defense Board. So at that point, we proved that we were safe. The building was safe as it sat. You know, if we did have a worst case accident, we would still be below the DOE standard as far as the co-located worker there. But the building's still sitting there, still being maintained. The building has 5 exhaust fans, 6 supply fans, very complex ventilation system. And it's very expensive to maintain. It's one of the things that White was talking about yesterday, is it's trying to reduce the cost of maintaining these older facilities. The Department of Energy asked us to stand up a deactivation project. So the deactivation project, basically our goal there is to prepare the facility for long-term safe storage at a reduced cost. So we created a deactivation project plan. The major steps in that plan is reconfigured ventilation. Our goal here is to make the building what we call cold and dark. We'll isolate all the utilities of the building, steam, power, water. We'll also remove as much as possible any of the hazardous stuff inside the building. That's the oils, lead, Freon is in equipment. We're in the process of doing that now. We're also, any contamination that's outside the process areas, we'll either remove it or fix it so it'll be immobile. And then, again, make it cold and dark. Once the facility is cold and dark, the cost of maintaining it goes down dramatically. We'll still have ventilation on the building. The building has external fans. It's supplied via a tunnel. That fan will continue to run, filter the air through a sand filter and out the stack. That ventilation will provide keep the enclosures themselves at a negative pressure, enclosures where the material at risk is, the MAR is. But everything else inside the building will be shut down. At that time, we'll be able to reduce the amount of surveillance that we do in the building. We'll reduce the amount of maintenance we do in the building. We'll still go in periodically to inspect the building just to make sure things are not degrading beyond what we want. Similar to what we do at F Canyon today, we're going to F Canyon periodically to ensure the interior of the facility is maintaining itself. And part of our deactivation plan, we work closely with the Area Completion Project. They're the group who's responsible for decommissioning the building to ensure that everything we're doing now will support their work as far as decommissioning goes, which Brian will go into here in a few minutes. But the work we're going right now, we are planning on completing this work in September of 22, if not a little bit sooner. That time, the building will be isolated. It's be the shell of the building there. We'll be making, again, periodic entries to inspect it. There's a picture here on the screen. It's the old manipulator. That's actually been removed now. That's an example of some of the contamination that's outside the enclosures we've dealt with. We have a couple other areas in the building that we know we have contamination that we'll deal with prior to altering the ventilation. Again, once we alter ventilation, our plan there is to have no internal work in the building at all. We'll be doing inspections, making corrections if we have to make corrections. In this process, we're not anticipating removing any additional inventory. All the inventory is actually in the cells. What I failed to mention earlier is we did hire SRS, the national lab, to come in and assay the entire building, to characterize the entire building so we know exactly how much material is left throughout the facility. Through that process, we learned there was not nearly as much left as what we thought. When the building was shut down, the building was assayed at that time. However, that was in the 80s. It wasn't done very thoroughly. We brought the lab back in with today's technology, did a very detailed survey of the building to help us understand what was there. Again, that fed into ACP and the decommissioning work, helping us get closer to final decommissioning there. So that's where we're at with the deactivation. Like I said, we're currently, as we speak, we're actually removing materials from the building now. Mainly it's a lot of shield water. We've got about 8,000 gallons of water that's used for shielding that we'll be draining. We sample it and drain it. All the equipment with the oil in it, various pumps, compressors, presses, hydraulic presses. We drain the oil out of all of them, disposing of that. Again, it's getting the facility in condition where it'll be ready for decommissioning when that time comes. So I know there's time for questions and answers after the whole presentation, but I'd like to just take a second. If you have any questions about deactivation before we move on to the decommissioning portion of the presentation.
I'm just curious, on that slide, fans in 292-2F remain in op. That's just a ventilation building.
It is, yes, sir.
I've never heard of that building before.
Yes, sir. It's adjacent to 235F. It's connected via a tunnel. And it's fan filter, and then the 292F is actually where the fans are that pulls air through the building. So it's an independent building.
Thank you.
I believe, if you see here, 292 bearings is right here. So 235F, the tunnel comes under at the ground, goes through the sand filter, it pulls through 292-2F, where the actual fans are, then out the stack. It's actually how the ventilation flow path works. And that'll remain running. That will keep the building under negative pressure.
Yeah, thank you very much. At one point, I think it was about slide 3, you mentioned there's still some plutonium left, and I think you called them the puff cells. How much are we talking about? Give us some context.
In the entire facility, there's about 500 grams total in the entire facility. So inside 235F, the puff cells is predominantly where it's located at. There's also a plutonium experimental facility inside that building as well. A little bit of holdup there, again, not much. There's a little bit of holdup in the ductwork in the building itself. But the vast majority is in the puff cells, and cells 1 and 2 for that matter. There's 9 cells total. The vast majority is in cells 1 and 2, so it's about 500 grams total.
Okay, thank you.
Any others? All right.
All right. I'll turn it over to Brian, and Brian Hennessy, and he'll walk us through the decommissioning work and where we're at in that process.
Could I ask one more?
Sure.
Jeff, you just scared me a little bit.
Okay.
500 grams of plutonium left, that's a pound, a little bit, in our terms. Is that usable for
It is,
weapons grade?
It is
which
not.
my concern.
it is not usable, nor is it accessible. We tried to remove it, and we could not.
I know you did.
Yeah, it is not accessible, and it's not weapons grade. That's important, understand? Yeah. 238 it's a heat source also, so, but yeah, couldn't get it if you tried.
Hey, Jeff? At some point, do we go into the basis of why that's okay, that amount of material left in this brief?
Yeah, we can, yeah, sure.
Yeah,
So,
just so everybody understands why it's okay to leave that material there, what happens.
it's a long-term, the building, and Brian will get into this a little bit later, we grouted in place. But when we tried to remove the material, you know, we went in and wiped it, you know, with brooms, scrubbers, and we cannot, it's embedded in the metal. It's you know, 238 is very high energy. You know, it'll be very light also for that matter, but it's actually embedded in the metal. But we did the safety basis analysis, and we looked at it, you know, could it be released? How could it be released? It won't be released. Again, and it's 230, it's not 239, it's 238, which is a big difference. But yeah, it's you know, it's not usable. Mr. Bennett, I answered your question.
Well, no, I was talking about what, you know, how the material decays, what the actual limit was to meet the regulatory requirements.
To meet the DOE standard, you know, it don't take much 238 to be airborne to get to 100 rem. But then, through the accident analysis, we proved that it won't be airborne. It won't be released through an earthquake. The cells themselves are structurally sound. They won't break apart, you know, in the event of an earthquake. Therefore, it won't be released. The material won't be released. Also, you know, what Brian can talk a little more about, we looked at the groundwater modeling through 10,000 years out, how much material, if any, will you know, get to the groundwater. All that was proved to be within the limits there, based on the amount of holdup left in the building. But we know that through the modeling that was done, you know, the environment will be safe, personnel today are safe. So a decision was made just not to go after it at that point.
What's the half-life of this 30?
I'll be honest, I don't recall off the top of my head.
87 years.
Okay, thank you.
Excuse me?
87 years, 87. And that's the part I was trying to get to, Jeff. It decays to lead. And the lead, it's not plutonium getting into the groundwater. It is the issue. It's not plutonium getting into the groundwater, it's the issue. It decays to lead, and there's a limit on how much lead could get into groundwater. That is the determining factor of how much plutonium you can leave there. So there's no danger of plutonium. It's decay products of stable lead that would be the issue.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. I'll turn it over to Brian, and Brian can talk through the decommissioning aspect and the modeling.
Thank you, Jeff. This is Brian Hennessy. I'm on. Can you hear me, James and everybody?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Jeff told you about half of what it is that I have to present to you, actually, but anyway, just so you'll hear it again, let's go through it all. So, a couple of years ago, EM began to express interest in closing this facility and decommissioning it. So we have been discussing how to do that through the CERCLA process under our federal facility agreement. We've been discussing that with EPA and the state for just over 2 years. We started in October of 2019. Deactivation, of course, is performed by the organizations that own these operating facilities, but decommissioning is actually a cleanup or a closure activity that's under the purview of the Federal Facility Agreement. So we use the CERCLA process, which is tailored for decommissioning, and with EPA and the state, who were obviously very agreeable to discussing this with us, we developed a range of alternatives for how to permanently close this facility, with a couple of things in mind. As Jeff already told you, one of the things is the extreme hazard associated with plutonium-238 and the type of work that it would have taken to try to further reduce the amount of plutonium-238 in these puff cells and process areas. And the other thing that we had in mind was that we have fairly recent experience with in situ or in place permanent decommissioning of facilities. We did the P reactor and the R reactor at Savannah River site in this manner between 2009 and 2012. So we have a methodology for doing it, and also for evaluating whether an in-place or in situ decommissioning would be protective in the short term and the long term. So the range of alternatives that we developed, let's see which slide we're on here. I need to go to the next slide, please. Wait a minute, previous slide, sorry. Yeah, the picture, yeah, here we are. So those are, in italics there are the four alternatives that we ended up evaluating in detail. One is the no action. In other words, leave the facility just as it is and let it go through time. We would continue to do surveillance and maintenance, but nothing further would be done to really change the configuration of the facility. Then we have two in situ alternatives. One is grouting the process areas, and that means the rooms in this building where plutonium and 238 and neptunium-237 were processed, they would be filled with cementitious grout from floor to ceiling, no voids, or you know, the entire room filled up. The second in situ alternative was to grout the entire building, the process areas and the non-process areas. In other words, the entire interior space of the building filled with grout. And then we also evaluated, just as we evaluated for the reactors, we evaluated totally demolishing and removing the facility down to grade. And of course, practically all the contamination would be removed as well, and there would be a soil cover placed over the foundation. And based on the risk to the workers, protectiveness, and that's short-term and long-term, environmental impacts, cost, the alternative chosen was to grout the process areas on the first and second floors. And of course, part of this in situ alternative, both of the in situ alternatives, was the emplacement of an engineered roof on the facilities, which will last for many centuries and essentially prevent any rainwater infiltration into the interior space of the building, even though it will be grouted where the material at risk is. Now we can go to the next slide. I'm sorry. Okay. So under the Federal Facility Agreement, the approach that we're taking to this decommissioning is removal action, a non-time critical removal action, and that is preceded by our preparation of a document with a very long name, removal site evaluation report, engineering evaluation, and cost analysis that for the rest of my talk I'll refer to as an ECA. And it was developed through core team scoping, which is how we came up with stating what the various specific problems are that are posed by the building and the material within it, and the range of alternatives, and the method for evaluating those different alternatives. And that ECA has been submitted to South Carolina DHEC and the EPA now. The comments are expected from the regulators in late November. Actually, we're just a bit out of date with these slides. We have received both EPA and South Carolina DHEC comments as of last week. We will develop responses to those comments. We will make any changes needed to the ECA, and we will turn around and submit a revision of the ECA to the regulators for their approval. After EPA and South Carolina DHEC approve the ECA, it'll be available for public review and comment in the spring of 22. And you all will hear, you'll have plenty of notice of that. There'll be an environmental bulletin. There'll be notices on the SRS website, and you'll probably hear about it at a CAB meeting. And after the public review and comment period is over and we have considered all the comments, the Department of Energy will issue an action memorandum announcing the intended action. In other words, what is the selected alternative for the final decommissioning of Building 235F. Next page, please. So as I mentioned, back in 2009 to 2012, the P and R area reactors were decommissioned in place or in situ. Some radiological contamination remained inside those reactors. All access points into the facility as part of the decommissioning were permanently sealed. There is no way in to be exposed to the contamination remaining inside. At the reactors, all the below grade areas rather, were grouted, filled with grout. So that's the reactors have a substantial below grade or underground portion. All that was filled with grout up to ground level. And importantly, we knew with good precision the amount and type of contaminants left in the structure, and the migration of those contaminants from the structure over time was modeled and evaluated for protectiveness. So in the case of, well, I'll get to that in a second. The reinforced closed Building 235F structure and the grouted process areas, of course, will prevent any worker or public exposure to the contaminants. And as was mentioned during Jeff's talk, the plutonium-238 is decaying away by 50% every 87 years. So a robustly closed facility will encase and prevent exposure to this plutonium while it is decaying away. And finally, and this is very important, because the plutonium-238, neptunium-237, and its decay products will be around for quite a while, computer modeling is done to predict how the contaminants and their decay products will move through the environment as the concrete and grout structure degrades over centuries and millennia. So the period of modeling of the movement of these contaminants is 10,000 years, and the models conservatively simulate the movement of the contaminants after the structure deteriorates. In other words, it uses assumptions about the soil, about the contaminants, about the rate of degradation of the structure that are more or less favorable to migration. So in other words, we don't assume any magic is going to slow these contaminants down. We do just the opposite. And the modeling shows that the remaining plutonium-238 and neptunium-237 contamination inside the process areas within building 235F and their decay products will not exceed regulatory standards in groundwater at the boundary of F area over a 10,000-year period. So there you have the protectiveness in a nutshell. The plutonium-238 itself will be shielded from any exposure to workers in the area or the public for centuries, because it'll be entombed within a grouted process area within a robust reinforced facility. And the contamination that is assumed eventually to migrate out of the facility into the soil and eventually reach the water table will not exceed any limits for these constituents or their decay products within a 10,000-year modeled period. Next slide, please. So this is about the configuration of the building. Either Tony or Jeff will need to take back over here. So I'll be happy to answer questions at the end of the presentation about the decommissioning regulatory evaluation.
What this shows is the areas that will plan on being grouted, as Brian talked about earlier. The process areas are shaded in, first floor and second floor. Again, the good thing about this is the process areas on the first floor, service areas are directly above them. So again, the areas that are shaded will be filled with grout. The areas that are not shaded, again, with their administrative areas, there's no contamination there. They'll be left as they are currently. The building itself will be sealed, but there'll be no activities done in these areas that are not shaded. So again, just the areas that are shaded, is rooms that will be grouted, as Brian mentioned.
So I believe Tony will handle the summary here.
But just to summarize, we are working to complete deactivation of 235F. We are following the circuit process to select the final decommissioning end state for 235F. We'll continue working towards decommissioning, and as funding allows, we'll move forward with that. And we will continue to keep the CAB apprised of any facility progress. Any questions on decommissioning?
Or any questions at all? Let's start with Jim.
In the earlier part of your presentation, you looked at 4 alternatives for the end state of the building. A couple of those involve what was identified as an engineered roof. What does that consist of, and why is it needed?
You want to take that, Brian?
Yeah, this is Brian. I can talk a little bit about this. The roof that's on the facility now will not last anywhere near as long as the engineered roof, and also there is some enclosed ductwork on the roof of the facility, and that just the current configuration of the top of the building and the material and construction of the roof just would not last long enough to be protective in the manner that our modeling of contaminant migration makes necessary. Is there, if you'd like a little bit more about the roof, I could ask one one of the subject matter experts who's also online right now to comment on the roof. Either Will or Monique.
So the roof is going to be designed to shed rainwater off. Right now, it's currently water drains through pipes. So eventually, the current roof will break down and allow water to get into the building. So we're putting an engineered concrete roof to shed water and decrease infiltration into the building for a long period of time.
Thank you, Will. And that was Will Jolin from SRS Area Completion Project Engineering.
Okay, so let me chime in here again. So what we're really doing is shedding rainwater for a longer life expectancy out of the roof. As far as the ductwork is concerned, is any of that ductwork tied into the current ventilation and will need to remain?
So once the decommissioning starts, the ventilation will be secured and that ductwork will be removed from the roof and the engineered roof will go on top. Got the rainwater.
Yep, thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Charles?
Could you go back to slide 9?
Yep.
Is zone 4 where the fuels, the glove boxes were?
So zone 1 is the puff facility right here. This is east side. So this is primarily where the glove boxes are
That was
concerned.
the 9 glove boxes you talked about earlier.
Yes, sir. Correct. And this area right here is the Act 9 build line. It's another old process that was used a long time ago. Not much hold up there at all, but I did mention there are other areas in the building. This processed Neptunium in this line right here has been cleaned out. This area over here is plutonium fuel form facility. It's an experimental facility. It's a smaller scale of puff. Again, it's been cleaned out. A little bit of hold up there, but again, not much at all. And then the areas above these rooms, second floor is actually where our support systems are that fed down into the process rooms themselves.
I may have missed it. Does this building have a basement?
It does not.
You don't have a problem putting all this weight on
No, sir.
the foundation? We fill it up.
Now we just got to support it from the inside. But yeah, correct. It is all above ground, 2-story.
Is there a lab in this building per se?
There was. It's old metallurgical lab, which is on the second floor area right here. Again, it's been shut down. Long time. It's been cleaned out. There is a line of glove boxes there. They did some metallurgy work back prior to 1980.
Thank you.
Greg?
Thank you, gentlemen, for the information. Now, just to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of terms and such, can you talk very briefly about the difference between deactivation, decommissioning, and the cold and dark terminology used earlier?
So deactivation is we're preparing the facility for decommissioning. Deactivation is removing the hazardous material from the building to the extent practical. Also isolating the services to the building. And again, cold and dark is basically the term we use once we kill power to the building. Once there's no more services to the building, steam, water, air, we consider it cold and dark. Basically, that's what it will be. It will be cold and dark. And then decommissioning is what Brian's talking about. We actually come in and prepare a facility for forever, basically. It's the final end state. It's the decommissioning. The deactivation prepares the facility for decommissioning.
Okay, and as I recall previous discussions, a building or facility can stay in a deactivated state for a considerable amount of time.
It can. Our goal here is once the regulators approve the decommissioning plan that ECA that Ryan talked about, as soon as funding becomes available, we can move into decommissioning. It's all depending on funding. Our goal with deactivation is to have that remain in a safe state at a low cost until decommissioning can be mobilized and carried out.
Thank you. One thing that is always, it's awe-inspiring to me almost in terms of the time frames we talk about. talk about projections 10,000 years in the future is amazing to me. And I'm thinking, looking at, I guess it was, you don't have to turn to this, but I was looking at the bottom of page 8 and talking about in 10,000 years, it won't, the leakage, or whatever you want to call it, from the plant will not exceed regulatory standards. I'm assuming, though, those are current day regulatory standards. Is that the 100 rem?
Not the 100 rem. The 100 rem is associated with an accident airborne release. This 10,000 years is released to the groundwater, to the environment.
And how much is, in current times, how much is that?
Brian or Will, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, I'll hand it over to Will, but basically these are current regulatory limits for groundwater contaminants. And Will will mention what a couple of those are, the significant ones. Please, Will.
Yes, the significant ones are beta gamma dose and alpha concentration. And we do look at radium concentration and lead standards. Someone asked that question earlier. And the model says there's no impacts above those standards for 10,000 years, but we actually went out to 100,000 years to look for peaks.
So yeah, we assume today's limits for groundwater contamination, and we model whether today's limits will be exceeded at any time within 10,000 years.
Right. What, how often do those regulatory limits change? Let me ask it another way, because it may, instead
You
of.
want me to take this, Brian?
Maybe, Greg, it'd be helpful to put it in perspective about what material would actually be left at that point. After 10 half-lives, 877 years for plutonium, we have 500 grams a day, it'd be half a gram.
Okay, right.
At 10,000 years, it'd be 5 times 10 to the minus 31 grams, so nothing.
No, right.
So plutonium's all gone, and you're left with the decay products are what you have to watch for.
Right. I guess what I was thinking, in 25 years, those regulatory limits change fairly frequently as we learn more of the science and such. I don't know, in 25 years, are we going to look back and say, wow, we met the regulatory limits of 2020 or 2021 or whenever these were put in place, but now we're allowing way too much release. You see what I'm saying? In 25 years, are we going to say, oh my gosh, we're killing everything?
Well, maybe something on the
This
limits.
is Brian.
I think we're way
Well,
below
I
the
think
limits
Rob-
today.
I
Anyway.
think Rob Pope wanted to say
Yeah.
something. I saw him light up.
Yeah, can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, this is Rob Pope with EPA, and I'm the project manager over F area for EPA. So, when we think about these issues of regulatory standards changing, and these are basically drinking water standards for groundwater, and because the groundwater under SRS is classified by the state as potential drinking water, that's what we have to go for. If they do change, by the time we start having a problem with these contaminants in groundwater, we have the time to, it's going to be monitored, so we have the time to look at how they have changed and what the impacts are, and if need be, institute another action. So, for instance, say in 5,000 years, these levels drop to 1/10 of what they are now because of our health concerns. Well, in 5,000 years, we can take a look at, should we implement a groundwater pump and treat system out there? So, we go with the standards we have today with the knowledge that they can change. And if they do, we'll come back and revisit the question and make sure that DOE's, if it's still DOE in 5,000 years, who knows? It may be the Department of EPA and DOE. Make sure that we're doing the right thing to be protective.
Right. I'm not thinking so much in 5,000 years. That's clearly beyond my scope. Policy changes fairly quickly, though. In 25 years, it's very realistic that standard could change. That standard could change in 10 years, realistically.
But we still have, even at a 25-year scale, we still have the time to look at it. This isn't going off-site, and unless someone starts building a subdivision there next to F Canyon with, drinking water wells on it, we'll have the time to evaluate it and make sure that we can if we need to take a secondary action, we can do that.
Sure, I appreciate that. That's fair.
John, you want to follow up on that a little bit more?
Yeah, just quickly, yeah, he's correct on MCLs. In fact, the last time the radionuclide MCLs changed, the Office of Water was very clear. They cannot be less stringent than they already were previous, way back in 1969. So we would anticipate they will go below 1 in 10,000 or above. And the other key thing is, I think he was alluding to, every 5 years, we reevaluate any remediated site under circle of 5 years. That means it's going to get looked at every 5 years. 30 years from now, oh yeah, something did change, we need to consider it. That happens all the time.
Right. When you said those standards did change, how long ago did they change?
2000, when the uranium MCL came out, they reevaluated the gamma beta that had been there since 69.
Mm-hmm.
That were equivalent to 4 milliram or 1 in 10,000 risk. They kept them like they were, so to some of us chagrin, but in other words, they made it saying we cannot, these cannot go up.
Right.
They must stay, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Hey, this is Brian Hennessy. May I mention one thing here, please? Rob sort of alluded to this a minute ago in his remarks. And I want to preface this by saying it does not change the applicability of the standards, of the groundwater standards, which are for drinking water. But this is F area on the Savannah River site, and there is no reasonable expectation of this shallow water table aquifer in the F area becoming a drinking water source. So, and the final remedy for the F area will undoubtedly ensure that the drinking water will be precluded from use as, or that the groundwater will be precluded from use as drinking water. So, as I said, it doesn't mean that the standards aren't applicable. We still have to model and compare the results to the groundwater protection standards, the maximum contaminant levels for drinking water. But there, I'll just leave it at that. Thank you.
Charles?
Greg, to go to your question, from somebody that has dealt with drinking water regulations for his entire life, I've raised the question on MCLs. If you look at the regulations, they're set at drinking 2 liters of water from the same source for 50 years. It's a half a gallon basically a day. Most of us aren't going to be living in the same place for 50 years, so you're not going to be getting the same contaminants. And very few of us drink a half a gallon of water a day. Second thing is the risk factor. If you do drink the 2 liters from the same source for 50 years, then the risk factor starts at 1 in 10,000 and goes to 1 in a million. I've had this argument on lowering standards on a nationwide basis. When we're looking at a risk factor of 1 in a million already, if you drink 2 liters for 50 years, you have infinitesimal chances. That's what the science is based on. That's what the law says. And so when you factor all that in, the drinking water potentially contaminated from this, it doesn't even pass through my mind with what they're doing, plus with what Mr. Bundy said. This stuff's going to go away with nuclear material in a relatively short period of time. Some of this stuff has a half-life of 30,000 years. So we're dealing with short-lived isotopes on a relative basis. And so I don't have concerns about that. But I did have a question. Yeah. All right. Completely from my own mind, when we close down, or we've already done it, when we close down those 9 puff boxes, whatever you call them, and this has been a concern of mine all along, we can't do the 238 fuel cells. Did I hear somewhere that HB can possibly make those things? Or did I dream that? I'm a big space fanatic too, kind of like nuclear.
Back when the facility operated, 235 took plutonium from HB line to make the fuel spheres. That campaign was moved out to, I believe it was Lano, I believe. Pretty sure that's where it went to, Lano. So I'm not sure what their capability of is there now. I don't think we have the capability on site at this time to do it. But again, when 235 stopped doing it, Lano continued doing it.
My comment on that is I hope somebody at DOE, the broad picture, is looking at the nation's need for these sales. I'm not hearing that.
And I'm quite confident that if we ever needed it again, we'd be much smarter using today's technology and devising a manufacturing process much better than what was done then because of the difficulties associated with this when it was built, in the 70s. It worked, it served its purpose at the time, but we can do better now.
Jeff, I believe it's Oak Ridge is where they're setting up the new source for DASA for the PU 238.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, on your diagram, there are a couple of items that are outlined in yellow that are outside the size of the building. What do they represent?
This here's an old stack that it's been reduced in size. It will be part of the decommissioning plan. They will deal with this stack. I believe the plan is to put a cap on it. Area right here is an underground tank. Start being closed, we will grout that tank as well. It's just noting that these are out exterior to the building, but they are part of the decommissioning plan.
Okay, so that the stack shows up at the second floor too. Okay.
And these are not really significant sources of any radiological contamination, I don't believe, right?
That's correct. The area, the sump over the tank over here has been cleaned out. There's nothing left in it. Again, the stack has been reduced in size. Has not been in service in many, many years. Again, it's something that need to be taken care of.
Okay. Phyllis?
Yeah, most of you in this room will think this is an idiot's question.
Oh, we
but-
love those. Absolutely love
But
it.
Mr. Budney has mentioned twice half-life. Would you explain exactly what that means? If it's an 87-year half-life, what does that mean to me as just a person on the street?
Well, if you start out with a pound of material today, once you reach the half-life, half of it has decayed away to some other end product. So at the end of 87 years, start a pound of filming today, you have a half a pound of plutonium left at 87 years. And
Okay.
87 more years, now you have a quarter of what you started with.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, that's what I thought, but I was trying to follow. So at what point with an 87-year half-life is it gone?
We usually view it as 10 half-lives, so that'd be 877 years. So at that point, if you run the math, you have 1,024th of what you started with.
Yeah.
If you run the math.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
You didn't see a second ago, Phyllis, when he said all that, I turned to him and mouthed, "Show off."
Yeah, I'm not sure how many of us could do that fraction in our head.
Yeah.
I did it on a piece of paper here.
I need a calculator, a computer, 6
You're
sheets of
not the
paper.
only one. Definitely not a dumb question.
That makes it worse. You did it on paper.
Any other questions from around the table? No? We're good? Thank you, gentlemen. I sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.
So seeing what time we've got, we ran ahead pretty quickly on that one. So why don't we just jump ahead and we can go into the ACER if you guys are ready, Matt and Teresa. We'll get you called up, we'll get you mic'd up, and we can go ahead and move on to that. After we get through with the ACER, it seems like we're going to be pretty far advanced with that, depending on how long Q&A goes. So I think we can go into voting at the end of that. Greg, do you have a question, or are you just
No,
holding
I'm
up?
sorry. No, I was looking at my notes.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Before we do, the ACER folks, do you have who you need online?
Do we need to call some? Do we
I
need to take a 10-minute
I
break?
see Motzi and a couple others. If there's some backup that you needed or wanted to make sure you had available
That's a good point.
on team.
We can take a 10-minute break and then come back in if you need to call some folks. What do you think? Do y'all want to call it? Let's take a 10-minute break. It is, what, 9:56. Let's come back at 10:05. And that'll give y'all a few minutes to call some folks, make sure that they get online, and we'll get it all set up. 10 minutes.
I was gonna be the one that's gonna be asking the dumb questions.
Jeff, I apologize. Looking back at I'm fascinated with this. I actually saw one of the fuel cells that's produced out there. There was a guy that worked in 235. I goes to my church, and I'm always pestered and asking questions. And he actually had a picture of one of them. This thing is red line or something. There's probably more risk than just asbestos in there.
Oh, okay.
Radioactive material. But you know, I mean, my whole career.
Video announcement that I was listening to Catherine.
So I go up to TV, there's a remote, and my concern is I got a picture and sound. That had 800.
It'll be, looked over by Renee and Liz, and so, but before I send it to them, I just wanted to see if you guys had any. Okay, alright, then I'll go ahead and send it to you.
I know.
Yes, it should be reviewed by. By Renee.
What I'm trying to do is I want to. I'm not saying that. So what you did right at we got to that.
Yeah. Go ahead, good to go.
God, we got a work session. Rural America, pull their way. Just less than 2 years. We did remove. That's the first step.
Oh, okay. Is that my responsibility? It's your responsibility. About 10 years ago then.
And nobody looks at the.
Which translates into anything that goes wrong is your fault.
I mean, there's such a safety. I had a MCL violation.
So that's what I was thinking to, is control of the
2 years ago.
I get the channel that she thinks she wants.
So
We're given verbatim. This is what we tell customers. We need to take it. One person is like, once you go back home. Risk factors. We barely see it.
And what did you say?
I picked it up. I worked at DMAC for 3 years.
That's the best you're gonna get.
So I did all right. Okay. How did class go last night?
That last, when I raised it, I noticed the whole time it was on the computer, and, you know, I figured it was good. Well, I went and talked to him.
Undergrad would probably have been.
Yeah, it could have been different as undergrad.
And, he said, you bring up that. He said, I don't know. It's completely different. And if it, they don't.
Did you have another good dinner last night?
Yes, we went to, I've always.
We went there for breakfast.
Oh,
Was it good last night?
yes.
Well, of course, short time.
Talk right on the law enforcement house here.
This board.
Some of those are running.
It's, you know, we try, like I say, we had all that.
Living in
We went to.
You're still alive.
Right. I'm always my door, so, you know. I think it's just dresses or.
Hey, I wanted to tell you, I like the shoes. I saw them yesterday. I'm like, oh, okay. I've been impressed with how long they last.
Yeah, I actually need new ones. But I've had them.
Me too.
That's sad.
Yeah, I don't wear mine every day, but anyway, they're comfortable. They've been holding up real well.
I wear these every day to work, so. I'm great. Quinn.
Okay.
Bert.
I'm Bert.
I've seen you cab meetings, do some presentations.
Well, what's worse is
Seen you at did you have kids that went to
Yeah, we went there for a good while, but we're now over there at Trinity.
sorry.
both of mine are out of tall pines now. So
Oh, wow, okay. Yeah, we thought about tall pines, and I guess the daily drive mom was gonna have to do every day. We decided to move to New Ellen.
I hear that's a good school. Yeah, they weren't quite as
You know, they were gonna close that thing down because of the population, and then when they opened up that sixth grade academy thing, I think some of the parents, because of where it was.
that threw us in a as well.
Hey, folks, this is going to be your 2-minute warning, so if we can start to find our seats. Start to find our seats for our 2-minute warning. Thank you.
Eighth grade over there. He loved it. That's been the best one. We were down there making good grades.
It is a little bit of a
But
drive.
I've heard good stuff from everybody I know that's got their kids going to college. Now, are they doing eighth grade out there yet?
Yeah. Oldest is 8.
Okay, so you started it.
Didn't start. We were.
James, before we get started again, I just laid around the table some brochures from the SRS History Museum in downtown Aiken, just putting in a plug for them. Anybody else wants to know about it, stop by and see it. It's got some very cool exhibit.
Thank you, Amy. All right, seems like we have everybody back at the table and we are ready to go. You may have noticed that, like I said, we ran really fast on that. We were thinking that 235F might take a little bit longer. It didn't, so we're going to jump ahead. We're going to go into the ACER. We're going to close out voting before we break for lunch. And when we break for lunch, that'll be an actual adjournment because after voting, we'll have done all the things and stuff that we needed to do today. So if we push past 11 o'clock a little bit, I hope that you'll forgive me if I eat into your lunchtime because it'll be worth it and we'll have completed everything we need to do. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Matt Baker and Teresa Eddy, and they'll give you an update on the ACER. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Now, I just had to practice saying good morning up here because I had good afternoon written on all my slides that I was practicing on. So I want to thank you for this opportunity to present the overview of Savannah River Site's 2020 Annual Site Environmental Reports. I think my first week that I started, I've been in this position for about a year, and my first week was the CAD meeting, the virtual CAD meeting last year. So it was a kind of a big first week to kind of hear what I'd be going through or introduce myself to this program last year. So I'd also like to go ahead at the beginning here and thank my co-presenter, Teresa and her team. The ACER is a huge collaborative project. There's at least 7 lead authors, the ACER project leader, Teresa, myself, and many other people who go and put work into the writing and collaborating for getting all this information, for collecting samples, to analyzing them, to then writing the chapters. And I'd also like to thank my predecessor, who's online. You can see her picture there in the middle. I'm going to call her out, Matsi Dingwan, for setting me up so well and taking the time to help me learn what I needed to have a successful publication for the ACER this year. Is it changing? I'll stop pressing things for a second. Oh, there we go. Thank you. All right, so during this presentation, we'll cover some of the background and history of the environmental site report. We'll give a high-level overview of some of the highlights from the report. We'll discuss the ACER summary report, which I believe the CAB members were given yesterday. You should be able to look along with that. And then we'll kind of summarize what we have presented. So one thing we're proud of, and I'd like to highlight here, is the 70-year history of the environmental monitoring program at Savannah River Site. So the environmental monitoring program assesses the impacts to the communities surrounding the site and the environment. And the site began publishing the report in 1959. As you can see from the first bullet, there are 2 DOE requirements that drive the publication of the ACER. But the real importance of the ACER is it's our opportunity to communicate information about the environmental impacts and performance that we've had on site to you, the public. That's really the main goal of the ACER, is to be able to provide you guys information. So we wanted to take a minute to recognize the 2 photographers whose photographs we used for both the ACER, full ACER report and the ACER summary this year. These photographs were both actually submitted through the site's Snap Photo Contest. And if you're not familiar with the Snap Contest, it's an employee-driven competition that kind of promotes site pride of ownership and also improves facility appearances as well as boosting morale in the workplace through art. All right, here's kind of what we're going to cover during this presentation. The topics covered in the full report are basically, chapter by chapter there. And then also what's covered in the summary report, But what I really want to kind of emphasize here is that the full ACER, the ACER summary, and the website are all laid out in various ways to help communicate to the wide range of audience who reads the report. And so there are 3 levels of interest for each chapter in the report. If you're looking at the full report, you'll get a brief summary of highlights and take-home conclusions at the beginning of each chapter. And then there, further on, there's more in-depth discussion within the chapter with summary tables and graphics. And then if you're reading the website or reading the ACER on the website, there are links to the more technical reports that you can get into. So we have people from all different technical levels who read the ACER, and we want to try to provide as many opportunities for them to get the best understanding as possible. And now I'll make way for my co-presenter, Teresa Eddy, to further discuss some of the individual chapters and their highlights.
Good morning, guys. So I've been on site 22 years now, and it seems like just yesterday I was an intern doing environmental monitoring, which got me interested in working at the site and doing this type of work. So it's an honor to be here today, and thank you for the time. And I'm going to go through chapter by chapter and give you an overview of some of the highlights. Chapter 2 is our environmental management system chapter. The site has an EMS that implements the U.S. DOE's commitment to sound environmental stewardship policy and practices. We do maintain a sustainability plan to implement goals that are set forth by DOE. And if you read the chapter, you'll notice there's a table of metrics that shows how the site performs against those goals. Some of those accomplishments are highlighted here on the slide. I'll try to move my mic because it keeps. Okay. We emphasize reducing total energy use, increasing renewable energy use, reducing water use, purchasing environmental friendly or green products, generating less solid waste, and increasing the number of sustainable buildings. The implementation of telework during 2020 did make some impacts to our sustainability goals. We recycled 48% of non-hazardous waste. The goal is 50%, mainly because there were not people there producing, less waste was produced. And the last bullet on the slide, due to the increase in telework, we were able to, our energy intensity dropped by 17%. The site has been recognized by headquarters for our positive environmental sustainability program, and we were included in the headquarters EMS campaign videos. So we are acknowledged in the complex for our environmental sustainability. Chapter 3 is our environmental compliance chapter. The site implements programs to meet requirements of the applicable federal, state, environmental laws and regulations and DOE orders. SRS has a long history of a strong environmental compliance performance. Throughout the COVID pandemic, SRS remained compliant with all the applicable environmental regulations, permits, federal agreements, and the DOE orders. We did receive one notice of violation for exceeding the NPDES permit limit for ammonia nitrogen at the Central Sanitary Wastewater Treatment Facility G10 outfall. There was immediate corrective actions implemented. No fines or penalties were associated with the NOV, and there were no adverse environmental impacts. Mr. Clark yesterday mentioned about the completion of 70% of the waste units. That's discussed in Chapter 3. And then we received the 2020 Project Management Excellence Award for remediating 2 coal ash basins and coal pile, and a coal pile basin. There's a photograph there for the D Powerhouse coal pile remediation before and after the end state. More on environmental sustainability and environmental compliance is covered in the summary report. There's about 4 pages of highlights in the report. And of course, you can always go to the full ACER, and it's got a lot more information than the summary report. So this is the summary report, and this is the full report. So you see there's a lot more information in this report, in the full report versus the summary. Now I'm going to go into chapters 4 and 5. These are our environmental monitoring program chapters, and the emphasis of those chapters are twofold. One being effluent monitoring, that is compliance with applicable permitted regulated activities and DOE requirements at the point of release to the environment, which includes water and airborne releases. The other component of the program is environmental surveillance, and that includes compliance with the DOE requirements to monitor effects of the operations beyond the effluents in the surrounding environment. There are two graphics there at the bottom of the slide that shows you the two sample types that we collect for both the non-radiological program and the radiological program. You'll notice there's a lot more media types for the radiological program, and mainly because the radiological program is used to assist with our dose methodology and calculations. So there's a lot more variety in the types of samples for that program versus the non-radiological program. Now I'm going to go through chapter 4 and 5 and go more into the results. Chapter 4 is our non-radiological environmental monitoring program. And the NPDES program consists of both industrial wastewater and stormwater. Industrial wastewater is facility processed water that is released to outfalls, permitted outfalls, and we have 28 of those on site. Stormwater is rainwater runoff, and we also have outfalls for those for collection of stormwater, and we have 39 of those. So SRS did comply with the NPDES industrial wastewater and stormwater permits. I mentioned the notice of violation earlier. SRS discharges did not negatively impact the water quality on the on-site streams and the Savannah River. We complied with the air permits, complied with South Carolina DHEC and EPA water quality standards for the drinking water program. As far as the environmental surveillance results, the water quality, sediment, and fish samples indicated levels comparable to the previous 5 years in the background control locations. We did add flathead catfish to our sampling for fish, and you see the photograph there at the bottom right of our electrofishing boat. What had happened there was that the field personnel had observed an increased number of flathead catfish when they were out sampling. So we always try to get a representative sample, and we added it to our fish plan, got it approved by South Carolina DHEC, and we all, so we added that to the program for looking at both the radiological and the non-radiological results. So that's discussed in this chapter. So we do try to, improve the program as we move along based on evaluations, continuous improvement initiatives, or like in this case, if there's, visual observations, there's more catfish, we need to make sure we are representative of what's observed in the environment. And those fish can be rather large. I think there was like a 10-pounder that they brought in for one of the samples. I wish I had a photograph of one to show you. Chapter 5 is our radiological environmental monitoring program chapter. It covers thousands of samples and analyses that are analyzed for radionuclides that could be present from releases due to SRS operations. We have 32 radiological airborne sources and 14 radiological liquid effluent sources. As mentioned on the slide, our releases met DOE requirements and the EPA NESHAP requirements for the air effluent results. Results for the surveillance media associated with both the air and the water pathways were comparable to background control locations and within the historical trends. The map there on the screen, when you look at the red circle, We added an air station to barricade 8. Why did we do that? Well, it came out of a recommendation from SRNL to improve our network efficiency, but also utilize it for determining dose to workers that work at Three Rivers Landfill. That is discussed in Chapter 6 of the ACER. So we, like I said, when evaluations are performed or, we do an annual program enhancements letter, and we evaluate the program annually and make improvements as necessary, and it's always discussed in the ACER. Animals harvested during the annual on-site hunts were monitored to ensure the total dose to any hunter from ingesting the meat is below the SRS administrative game animal release limit of 22 milligrams per year. So we released 347 deer, hogs, and coyotes to hunters, and all of them were below that administrative limit. Chapter 6 is our radiological dose assessment chapter. DOE Order 458.1 establishes dose limits to the public and the environment at 100 milligram per year for all pathways. It also requires DOE sites to comply with EPA's NESHAP requirements for 10 milligram to the air. So for 2020, the representative all pathway dose was 0.36 milligrams, which is 0.36% of the 100 milligram standard. And there's a breakdown there on the screen for air and liquid. The graphic there shows you all the parameters that are incorporated into the representative person calculations. So that kind of reinforces what I said earlier, why we collect such a variety of media. There is an article in the summary report that goes a little bit more into the representative person and how that's determined if you want more information on that. If you look visually at a football field graphic, 100 milligram representing a 100-yard football field, SRS is at the 13-inch line. So SRS operations do not exceed DOE dose limits. Chapter 7 is our groundwater management program chapter. The SRS groundwater management program ensures future groundwater contamination does not occur, monitors groundwater to identify areas of contamination, remediate groundwater, and conserve groundwater. Those are all the emphasis for the groundwater management program. They mentioned earlier about the MCL, so y'all are familiar with that. It's a risk-based concentration derived from standardized equations of exposure and toxicity. So there were no exceedances of the drinking water standards. Tritium detections in the Georgia groundwater monitoring wells have stayed below the MCL for tritium. There's a nice graphic in the full report that you'll see that visually. The groundwater remediation component of the program, 15,303 pounds of volatile organic compounds were removed from groundwater in the Vados zone. This is during 2020. And Mr. Clark mentioned yesterday about phytoremediation, and we prevented 42.7 curies of tritium from reaching SRS stream. Since the year 2000, that's been a 70% reduction. That photograph there shows you the remediation using the trees and the plants. That's the phytoremediation project there. SRS continues to report its drinking water use to South Carolina DHEC. We used 2.27 million gallons of water per day during 2020. Chapter 8 is our quality assurance chapter. And the quality assurance, if you look at the graphic there, there's an interrelationship between quality assurance and quality control. We try to ensure precision, accuracy, and continuous assessment, as I mentioned earlier, too, with the programmatic component. The laboratories maintain South Carolina DHEC certification, passed audits under the U.S. DOE DOCAP program. You may have heard of that acronym. Past proficiency tests. Our environmental monitoring program showed acceptable duplicate and blind results. And we conducted continuous improvements initiatives throughout the year. That's talked about in the chapter, and some of those I mentioned during the presentation, adding the air station, adding flathead catfish to the program. Another big thing we're working on is we are migrating into a commercial off-the-shelf environmental database system, and that has been a huge project, and that's going to go online next year. So all of those plus more is talked about in the chapter as far as continuous improvement initiatives. So that concludes an overview of the chapters for the full report. So Matt's going to come up and give you a synopsis of the summary report and close it out.
Thank you, Teresa. So Teresa held up and showed you the summary report before. That provides a good linkage between articles and sections, articles that are in the summary report and sections that are in the full report. And, it's a nice magazine-style article guide to help kind of summarize and educate the public. As you can imagine, printing out volumes of these is not as cost-effective as printing out something like this. So these are easily distributed to the public. And topics that we've included in this year's ACER summary report were kind of that history of the 70 years of the environmental monitoring program on site. We talked about the radiological monitoring and the dose received to the public for this year. We highlighted a couple environmental accomplishments and some of our environmental sustainability, which included reclaiming silver from silver nitrate on site and the benefit of recycling to the site and the region. It also discusses briefly some of the education outreach and how we engage the public. So we'll wrap up the presentation just with some conclusions from the 2020 ACER. Again, highlighting that we've maintained a comprehensive environmental monitoring program on site for more than 70 years. We continue to improve and try to remain cost effective with our technology to achieve SRS's environmental sustainability goals. We continue to monitor, remediate, and conserve groundwater at the Savannah River site and protect the public and the environment from future contamination. And the annual dose from SRS operations was less than 1 milligram, demonstrating we're not causing undue harm to our community. And with that, we'll take any questions you guys may have. Thank you.
All right, folks. Jim, you're first up.
I think it was back on slide 10. Okay. What monitoring takes place on the Georgia side of the river? I don't see any indication that you have any de-effluents.
I wouldn't expect them either, South Carolina. So.
Yeah, and actually, we have at the beginning of chapter 5, we have a summary of Georgia versus South Carolina. We have at Augusta, in Augusta near the airport, there's an air station there. We have the Georgia monitoring wells, I mentioned those. Those are in Georgia. There's some food stuff that's collected. So if you look at chapter 5 at the beginning, we actually highlight the sampling in Georgia versus South Carolina.
And obviously they're sharing that data with you.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, they do. Yep. We have a what's called a radiological a REMP program, radiological environmental monitoring program that's engages with Fogel, South Carolina DHEC, and we get together. We used to get together more frequently, but with COVID, it kind of stopped some of those meetings. But we've been gearing back up, and we just recently had a couple of meetings with South Carolina DHEC on sharing data and all that. So, but yeah, at the beginning of the chapter, it goes into the 2 different states and the monitoring. Okay.
Charles?
In the report, I understand there's 28 outfalls, 39 stormwater outfalls. I have no idea how many drinking water permits y'all must have down there, but you only had one NOV that I heard mentioned. Is that correct? That's incredible. For those of, it's really easy to exceed the limit. That's incredible with that much testing that you're doing. So, my hat's off to you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from around the table? Greg?
Thank you all very much for a nice report of your report. Mike, I'm wondering, do you guys as the leadership, do you kind of look at this as a summary of your year?
I don't think so much as a summary, but we look at it very closely to make sure we're doing what Charles said and don't have any NOVs. That's the objective. So, and these are the results actually that we expect each year. So we look very carefully to make sure we're meeting the standard year in and year out, because hey, we all live here too. We don't want anything bad in the environment. We got to protect it. So we think it's an important surveillance methodology that we use to make sure we're meeting the mark on all.
Okay. Did you learn anything from this report that's going to change anything you do next year or in the coming few years?
I don't know of anything in particular that changed other than to continue the surveillance as we've done.
All right.
One thing I could mention too is we also have a lessons learned meeting every year from one year to the next, where the ACER team gets together and we go over, okay, what went well, what didn't go so well. So we try to implement if DOE's engaged in that, and so any recommendations that comes out of that meeting, we try to roll those into next year's ACER project.
Okay. That makes sense. I guess one of the reasons I was asking about this, I just recently and was involved at my place of employment, and I'll just leave it at that. We're getting ready to go through a strategic planning process, and somebody very high up in the process said that he had done strategic planning at a number of places, and they were like a lot of government reports. They prepare these reports and then put it on a shelf, and nobody ever looks at it. And I was trying to get a sense if that's sort of what this was like. In those terms, how does the public receive this? Does the public consume this in any way? Can you all tell?
We hope so.
How can you tell?
Amy?
We've tried to do, we get involved in, outreach when, like the Teaching Radiation, Energy, and Technology workshop here recently. That's one method that we try to communicate to the public the results. The public seems, I tell you, the summary report is one of those they will read and they do enjoy looking at. Like we've had summer interns give us feedback on it as well. So this is a little bit easier for the public to digest and be interested in versus reading this full technical document. Amy, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just going to add that we do send it out in a press release, and it's posted on the website. It's like a lot of things. It's as long as things are going okay, it doesn't really draw a lot of interest. We have had some of the new congressmen and senators in Georgia have asked about the results of the report. Senator Ossoff and his staff have asked a lot of questions about the report and the monitoring that we do on the Georgia side and downstream. So we get interest from some folks, but
Can you tell visits to the website and where it's located?
I don't have that off the top of my
Right,
head.
well,
but
no,
yes,
I
we
just
do.
wondered.
We can.
Yes, and actually, the only thing I couldn't, because I asked our IT guy that, and he was able to give us the numbers, and it was higher than what I was thinking it would be. But what he couldn't do was tell us the difference between on-site people going to the website versus off-site people, because we go to it all the time. So, yeah, I'm not sure how many off-site public folks actually go to the website routinely.
That's
I'm
part
sorry,
of
go
what
ahead.
we were gonna hand out, some of those tonight. It's one of the things
Yeah.
we talked about in our drop-in, if we can drum up interest, get people to care. But that's one of the things that we struggle with. And I'm looking at you guys, I don't know if DHEC has the same kind of experiences in your public meetings, but usually, what we find is that when things are going well, you know, if people aren't concerned or aren't worried about it, then it's hard to drum up. We'll have public meetings, and we joke oftentimes that we're talking to ourselves.
Right.
You know, it's all people that work at the site, or we present to each other.
But generally, that means that things are going well, because when
Yeah.
things aren't, they do show up.
Yeah. But we do try to get it out there, make
Right.
it accessible to people.
Well, I was thinking in terms too of the survey that we just did, and I think there's been some discussion that the public is possibly more knowledgeable than people expected. And I didn't know if maybe this was part of it. Maybe people are accessing the ACER somehow and picking up bits and pieces of information, or the media are covering it somehow. It's just a thought in the term.
I think one of the things too, and Wyatt hit on this point a little bit yesterday, there's a lot of outreach that goes on at Savannah Riverside, and it's not necessarily all under one umbrella. So for example, SRS hosts CSRA College Night. Thousands of people in the area attend that. So some people know about SRS because of College Night. Savannah River Ecology Laboratory does so much outreach. I mean, it's hard to find a student in the area that hasn't had a presentation from Sean Poppy, hasn't brought an alligator or a snake to their school. So a lot of people know about the site and things that go on at the site from that perspective too. And that's something that we've tried to capture over the last couple years, because even with just MOUs with universities and with HBCUs, each contractor and each organization is really doing their own thing and their own outreach. And so we don't necessarily have a mechanism where we can say, okay, let's, kind of quantify this. It's hard to do when, because everybody's doing so much individually.
So in those terms, the contractor, although obviously that's not what it is, the principal in this is DOE. So for instance, it would be unusual at college night to distribute something like
Right. The students care about getting those scholarships that we're handing out.
that. Right. But their parents are there.
They don't want to hear about your
Right, but their parents are there.
Now, when
and
they've hosted tours on site, they've handed these out when they've done.
Right.
Yeah, we hand them out with the tours. We also, we mention the environmental reporting in our virtual tour that we're doing. And I'll just put a plug in for that right now. We've gotten a lot of hits on that virtual tour because we had to cancel public tours, and we actually got it on South Carolina Educational Television. We showed it a couple of times on SCE TV, and so we try to get the word out.
Yeah. For people who haven't seen that yet, it's a nice product. If you have a little bit of time, go take a look. All right, I will leave it at that. Thank you. Thank you all for a good report.
Thanks, Craig. Phyllis?
I was just wondering, you have all those numbers on deer when you've released that for hunters to hunt. Is there any mechanism, or will there ever be any mechanism to fish? Will the fish ever be safe?
I don't.
You mean for the public to come on site and fish?
Yeah, to eat. I mean, whether it's y'all or us. No?
No, we do a tournament for wounded warriors. It's all catch and release, though. Perhaps it might be more appropriate to get Gene
Right, I was saying, I know that they've done some
from
studies,
SREL
right.
to talk about that at a future CAB meeting about what the issues are there, because there's more than just anything that occurred on the site with the water those fish are in, so.
I just,
don't think we have the expertise here right today to tell you about that.
I just thought about that because I know that was a lot of the discussion at Langley Pond because of all of the textile stuff that was dumped there. And I've wondered if now that they've emptied it and redone it, if it's still in the soil under it, you know, or if it'll ever be safe.
And with
we'd
the,
have to get back to that.
yeah, and with the deer hunting, you know, we have a special gamma detector that we take to monitor the animals and assume, you know, that they're going to eat the entire animal. That goes into the calculation before we release the animals. So that'd be another whole tricky.
Yeah.
And there are definitely studies on that. I know that Savannah River Ecology Lab, even when they drained Parr Pond, I think Dr. Domi Adriano grew crops in the soil just to see what the uptake was, even when Parr Pond was drained at one point in time. So there's been studies, but like Mr. Bunny said, we don't have the proper people to talk to the current numbers or future
The other issue,
projections.
is there's alligators out there too.
Yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that part.
The interesting thing
Rather
is
large
what,
ones,
Yeah,
too.
large
what Dr. Rose told me was that on, I guess on P Pond, that they routinely catch the alligators for study purposes. If you go down a boat on that pond, the alligators will stay away because they don't like the boats. But if you go out on L, they'll come right up alongside.
Yeah.
So I don't think I'd want to be fishing with the alligator right alongside. And they're pretty big alligators.
DeAndre, you had your card up. Did it get asked and answered?
Greg kind of hit on it. My thought process was exactly what you're talking about as far as the survey. How do we incorporate the survey with those that are being questioned about their knowledge about Savannah River site, Department of Energy, not just asking the question, but providing some additional resources that may cause them to really look more into it. One of the interesting things yesterday was when I left here, my wife who was here with me asked me how was class. And so I was sharing with her, being that I'm new, there's still a lot I don't understand, a lot that I don't know. Even from some of the acronyms that were used, some of them I remember, a lot of them I didn't. But after dinner, what was interesting was she was still asking about it. We actually stopped by the table and pulled out the survey because that was the thing she was most interested in. And so just having that information available was very helpful because there are people out there that really want to know, but unless it's introduced to them, it goes right over their head. I was even thinking about United Way. I forget the gentleman who was presenting yesterday that was talking about their involvement in United Way. Wyatt. He's, I think that's a great thing. And so what are we dealing with United Way? We're dealing with the environment as it relates to people. But if the community that they don't feel that they're living in is safe, that's also another impediment on them. So how do you marry those two from the environment to the environment of the conditions? I think that this will marry along with that really makes it better. So even with United Way, how can we get this into their hands to be able to disseminate between the, I think it's 23 organizations that they are assisting throughout the CSRA. I think those two things would be good. So I appreciate Greg for hitting on that and for you, Amy, for highlighting the various organizations that you're already sharing with, partnering with, trying to get out in. Guys, thank you. This is a very, very good report. I definitely would like to get my hands on it.
Just for you and everybody else who may not realize this, online on the SRS webpage, not only is it this summary and the full report, but they have reports posted online going back about a decade or so, which is actually really handy to have. We had my company hired an IT guy, and when he got to SRS, one of the things that happened, he went, I didn't realize where I was working, am I safe, all this stuff. Let me show you this. And I pointed him at the ACER summary reports and gave him an afternoon of light reading. But I mean, it gave him something to look at. And he came in the next day and went, got it. This is a great place. This is a safe place to work. I understand where I am now. Yeah.
I'm going to talk with
We also have some new SRS overview books that are hot off the press. They let me pick up 50 copies early yesterday at the print shop, and the reason we're going to make limited distribution on them is because we just announced a new liquid waste contractor, so we're going to have to change the book again. But we had just updated it for BSRA to add the new contract at the lab. So those are other documents where we can get those overviews out at the airport and other places. I also just wanted to mention with respect to the United Way that several of the contractors and even DOE in the past, we provide loaned executives to support the United Way campaign. And that is a good way because those people aren't just helping the United Way, but they're also serving as ambassadors for SRS in the community. So we do get some feelers out, that way too.
Charles?
I'm curious, is there a direct link from our website, CAB, to this report? Direct, not through 14 channels?
No, I don't have a
I want to
direct.
consider that.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
The other thing is, Amy, bless your heart, your website.
I know what that means.
Your website is not the easiest to navigate.
Well, okay, so that's something that we're actually working on in my office, because there's actually two websites. And there is the www.srs.gov website that everybody seems to go to. We actually are energy.gov/SRS. So we are part of the Department of Energy's larger website, and we recognize that that's an issue, that there are two websites for Savannah Riverside, and someone actually in my office has spent a considerable amount of time making sure that the energy.gov SRS platform is consistent with so that the Department of Energy would like everyone to use the DOE website and then link to Savannah Riverside that way. But just over the years, each site had already kind of set up their own website. So we're trying to get our arms around that. It's harder than you would think. Okay. But yeah, we've got more than one website, and then we also have talked about how we will incorporate the CAB website and how we need to do that. So we recognize that's an issue. Yeah.
Angela, I see your hand is up online. Do you have something that you want to add to this?
Hi, yes, thanks. Good morning. I was just going to add on the discussion for how the ASA report gets out there and changes that we've made. The CAB has been instrumental with us trying to change the executive summary such that we answer the question, what does this mean to me? And so I just want to put a plug in that. In the past years, they've been very instrumental giving comments on, what does it mean? Can you just tell me, is it okay to drink the water and hunt on the land? So that's one of the things that the CAB has done for us in the past. And I'm sorry, this is Angela Holmes with DOE Savannah River.
Thank you, Angela. Mike?
Greg asked me earlier if I'd learned anything from the ACE report to share. I amend my remarks because I learned what a flathead catfish was. Deficiency in my knowledge from growing up in the Northeast, I had no idea. But no, I did. And they can grow to 72 pounds, I read.
Well, when they were telling me about it, I'm like, what is it? What is it? I was looking it up too. Yeah, they can be rather large, but we didn't want to take a 72-pounder to the lab.
I make a hell of a display at the front, though. Put it in here. All right. Any other questions or comments from around the table? Seeing none. Thank you, folks. We sincerely appreciate your time today. Thank you. Before we move into our recommendation voting for today, we have a scheduled period of public comments. And so I need to ask, does anyone, I haven't checked the sign-in sheet, but there's not a lot of us here. So is there anybody here in the audience, Marilyn, that would like to make a public comment today? Marilyn?
Hello, my name is Marilyn Parson. I am from Bluffton, South Carolina. And I am so delighted that the CAB is, first of all, meeting in person. I think that's wonderful. And it's also wonderful that you're here at the beach and close to the low country. And I am disappointed that there are so few people. I believe I'm the only person representing someone from the public. Most everyone else is being paid to be here. Well, of course, the CAB is not being paid to be here, but the others. Anyway, I'm delighted that you're here. On the years that I was on the CAB, we had at least 2 years where we never did what we call downstream meetings. And it was because of budget constraints. So I'm thrilled to see the CAB here this far away. I live in Bluffton. My water comes from the Savannah River. So what goes on at the Savannah River site is important to me and to all residents of, well, that's not true, most residents of Beaufort County. When the CAB held a meeting in Beaufort several years ago when I was on the CAB, we had a wonderful presentation by a person from the Beaufort Jasper Sewer and Water Authority. And Earl Shepard was on the board at the time, one of a excellent member, by the way, and he worked for that organization. And so he brought people from that organization to talk about drinking water relative to the Savannah River. And when I look at my drinking water report, I find tritium, okay? When the people at the water plant, they take the water quality of the Savannah River site very seriously and monitor way upstream so that if there is some contaminant that might come from the Savannah River site, they have a way of diverting the water, and they have several weeks of water supply if an emergency should happen. Now, that's not a very long supply of water, but it at least keeps the community safe. I was very shocked and saddened to see the issues with the CAB membership. The CAB has a very important role in keeping what goes on at the river, or the Savannah River site, letting the community know what is going on and how the community feels. It's a conduit from the community to the Department of Energy. And I was very upset and that there are issues with that, and I assume that they will be with the good leadership that we have here at the Savannah River site. I have faith that that will be resolved in short order. I do think it's interesting to look at the changes over the years with the concerns of the CAB. I was on the CAB when we had the 25th anniversary of the CAB. The CAB had been around for 25 years, and we had a wonderful event. Many of the previous chairs of the Savannah River Site Citizen Advisory Board were present there. And at the time, I was chair of the CAB and had the opportunity to interact with those former CAB members and had an opportunity to ask them what their concerns were. And it was so interesting to see the changes over the years. What we were concerned about when I was on the board were not even issues that were high on their concerns. When I was on the board, and I just have to mention two things because it's so interesting. When I was on the CAB, one of the things, and I helped write a recommendation actually about Building 235F. And the year I was on the CAB, the Defense Nuclear Facility Safety Board, I think I have that right. I know the guy that presented yesterday, I'm sorry, I don't know his name, from the Savannah River remediation. I'm sorry, I don't know his name, but he said we make 10 mistakes every hour. So I may make some of my allotted hour mistakes here, but I believe that's the name of the organization. That was when they had written their report saying that Building 235F was a real danger, potential danger, if a fire occurred there, and talked about the harm to, there was a large construction site going on right next to that building, and hundreds of employees would have been impacted if a fire had occurred, even though that was a remote possibility that there would be a fire in that building. It was a low risk, but still the risk was not zero. So I just loved seeing what the condition of 235F today. That is fabulous. That has the deactivation and decommissioning is in sight. Another thing I wanted to mention, the last presentation that we had about the environmental monitoring that goes on at the Savannah River site, and people raised the issue if anybody really cared about that. I guarantee you, when I was on the board, we had one of the biggest concerns that we had was a group of people from Georgia who were very, very concerned about what they perceived as inequality in terms of the monitoring that was done in Georgia versus what was done in South Carolina. And they came to those women, largely women. One of the organization, I believe, is called WAND, Women Action for New Directions or something like that. Is that it? They came to the meetings and just hounded the board about it. The Department of Energy, I can't even tell you how many presentations we had, right? How many presentations we had about the monitoring that went on relative to the Savannah River site. I mean, this was a big deal to them. Well, one of the things that had happened is that Georgia, the state had cut back on their monitoring program. It was one of the major issues, and that those people had worked really hard to get Georgia to invest in monitoring, and they didn't get it done during the time I was involved with the CAB. So at any rate, there was a lot of pressure on the CAB, and I decided that we needed to respond to this group of people that spent all of this time coming and expressing concerns. So we wrote a recommendation, put it back into the hands of the Department of Energy, say, okay, we've seen all these presentations. Now we wrote a recommendation that asked for them to study to see if more monitoring could be done in Georgia. And the most wonderful thing happened when the Department of Energy came back. They came back and did ask that the university do a study. Which organization?
It was SREL.
Yes, yes, yes. Did a wonderful evaluation of the impact of SRS. And as a result of that, there's been a community, there is an actual program, and I'm not going to go into it, but I think it'd be nice if at some point in time, the history of that, what happened with that would be known to the current CAB, because it was pretty significant. But I was actually, this was at one of the rare after I left the board, I tried to be very active as much as I could. I was at a meeting, And and the Department of Energy talked about this new wonderful outreach program with Georgia and those communities that were largely concerned. I mean, I was absolutely, it just blew my mind. I was so thrilled. So during my public comment, I mentioned that. I said, this is fantastic. Sometimes if you wait long enough, these good things will happen. I sat down. One of the gals from Georgia that had been there, I can't even tell you, dozens of times, turned to me and said, yes, but they're not doing any more monitoring. Okay? So I can't wait. I want to read the report. I'm going to see if there are any additional, I couldn't see from this what monitoring sites. So I'm looking forward to reading the report and seeing if there are any changes, because I have copies of the previous reports, and see if there's any changes in the monitoring in Georgia. And I'd also, at some point in time, would love to hear how those meetings are going with that group from Georgia that really came and put the pressure on. It was not a popular issue with the board. The board was not in consensus about it. It was pretty contentious, but it came out, I think, really well in the end. Department of Energy responded I couldn't believe what they ended up doing, and it has turned out. But I hope that initiative continues to be successful and has been expanded. So I would like an update. I'll talk to some people about that at some point in time. And I think that is all I need to say, except that I think that it's wonderful that the Department of Energy sends such quality people to these meetings to help the CAB understand. And when we have the head guy comes, when we have, that is really, really significant to the CAB. I'm here to tell you, when I was on the CAB and the leadership, key people, head people came to these meetings and devoted a lot of time. It really, really meant a lot to the CAB and to the people, the communities that they represent. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Marilyn. All right, folks, that's our public comment time for today.
Can I make one comment on what she said, James?
Yep.
She's talking about the REMOC
Yeah, I was
program,
about to commit to.
and we can commit to providing an update on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We can follow up with you on that, Marilyn, and let you know where that landed.
And also, we may be able, when Dr. Rhodes comes and gives his update, we could add it to the agenda for the rest of the CAB.
Sure. Okay. You ready, folks? Let's move into some voting. We've got 3 issues on the table, the 3 chairs' recommendations that Greg brought us up to speed on yesterday. So we'll start with charge number 1. That's the outreach one. It's the one that's got the highlights on the front. Cover where dates will go once it's all approved by all the boards. And we'll start there. Does anyone, before we entertain a motion to vote, does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns about this particular charge? Greg?
James, I want, just real quick, I want to say something based on part of the discussion you and I had yesterday. When I was discussing these things we're voting on, I divulged to you guys how I planned on voting on those. I did not do that with the intent of trying to persuade you one way or the other, but to try to provide the basic information for you. I remember in the past we've had discussions on chair's recommendations, and it was very unclear, at least to me, from sitting in the CAB, sort of which way to go on it. So what I wanted to do is provide you all, at least my perspective as having been somebody who'd been there and participated in it. Clearly I hope everybody will exercise their individual judgment and they've seen the information and vote the way you see fit. But I did want to say that my intent was not necessarily to persuade people, or wasn't to persuade people in any way. So I just wanted to make sure everybody understood that.
Thanks, Greg. Do we have a motion to vote? Charles?
I move for adoption.
Okay, do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Seconded by Jim. All right. I'm going to ask for you to just raise your hands and hold them up until we're done counting. I'm going to ask for all of the yays, nays, and abstain, and we'll start with yays. Do we have, who's voting yay? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 5 of them. Nays, just out of formality, we'll count nobody since everybody voted yay, and abstains again. All right, thank you. The motion passes unanimously. Next up will be the charge number 2. This is the one about 10-year strategic plan development. That's what it says right at the top. It was 2 and a tiny bit of page 3. Looks like this. Any questions, comments, concerns about this one before we move into motion to vote? Any thoughts anybody would like to share from around the table? I'm assuming the same thing applies for this, Craig.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. That was a general statement
I just wanted to make
on that.
sure.
And if in the future when we're doing those, if you all would prefer I not do that, please let me know. I just saw it as additional information that might be helpful to you. So, and with that said, I'll go ahead. I guess I should probably be the one who makes the motions for this. So I'll move that we vote on this.
Okay. We have a motion for Greg. Need a second? Second from DeAndre. All those in favor, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you, folks. Any nays and abstains? We don't because we ran out of people. All right, unanimously approved again. Thank you very much. And the third one for today, this was the membership process recommendation. This is the version that went to the chairs meeting, was noodled on. Has the impact statement on the back. Any questions, comments, concerns about either the recommendation or the impact statement before we move on?
Yeah, point clarification for me, James.
Sure.
Is this to approve a recommendation to all the chairs, or is this just to affect SRS?
This is for the entire complex, so for all the boards.
Right.
All the boards, chairs met, thought that this was a good idea. They have to, then, this is why you're voting on this a second time essentially, is because once it's approved by all the chairs in this form, then it has to go back to the boards to be approved, and then it'll become a chair's recommendation at that point. Okay. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Do we have a motion to vote?
I'll move that we vote.
All right, and a second? And a second from Phyllis. All right, all those in favor, please raise your hands in the affirmative. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thank you, folks. Nay and abstain. Remains at 0. Thank you, everyone. That is all our agenda items.
I want to make a comment on that too, now that everybody's voted on it. I think everybody in this room probably recognizes the issues and the frustrations that we all felt over the membership process. And I just want to say a word to this cab and to Greg in particular for how all of this went down at the SSAB chairs meeting nationally. Greg said in his remarks about this recommendation yesterday that things got a little tricky during that meeting, and I have to say that we were all online watching. You guys do your business as a complex-wide, group of people, and I personally could not have been prouder of the way that this board handled things, and you in particular, Greg. I mean, you got a little bit of battle there at the first part of it, but then one person came on and said, this is a problem, and I agree with this, and then it was like dominoes. Everybody just really got behind this and understood why you needed this recommendation, why you guys felt it was so important. So you guys, I just wanted to say that that this cab can be really proud of the job that you did in that meeting. It was very well done.
Thank you. I mean, this was a really important issue, and we had a lot of people supporting it and pushing it, and I appreciate everybody's support on this. And hopefully it will make a difference for all the cabs and DOE. So thank you all for your kind word.
All right. Mike?
Hey, before we conclude, I just want to say thanks for everybody for coming in. I think it's great that we finally got to meet together. I thought it was important that we get together with you folks who've stuck it out through this process before we bring on all the new members we're going to have. So it was great to see everybody in person. Thanks to Amy and Delisa and Jim and all the staff for pulling this off and making it work in person again. It's a great value to be able to meet in person like this, so I really appreciate it. Especially pretty cool because, you know, one of the things I do is everybody new comes on board, checks in with me personally, so I get to meet everybody. I hadn't seen Matt or Tony, who talked here in a year since they checked on board, so it's good to see that they're still with us, you know, so. Thanks.
Any other questions, comments that we need to address? Greg, would you like to close it out?
All right, let's wrap it up then. All right, thank you, CAB colleagues. I appreciate your time and attention, coming and spending your time this day and a half getting updates, and it was very helpful, and I think it was a great meeting. Thank you, DOE staff. Thank you, Mike Budney and Amy and everybody for being here. And for, you know, we know how valuable y'all's time is, and we appreciate you coming and spending it with us, as well as the state and local represented agencies coming. We appreciate you guys coming as well and spending your time with us. Always thanks, James, team, for a great meeting. It went real well. We were glad that you were able to pull us together after, what, a year and a half or so. It seems like we've been apart. I want to make sure and note, don't forget tonight, the drop-in. I'll be there for at least a little while, so I hope I can see, or hope some of y'all have some time to stop by as well. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing everybody. I'm seeing January 24th, 25th. It looks like in Aiken or North Augusta. I'm hoping we can spend a little bit of time at that meeting figuring out how to get all these new and returning CAB members oriented and up and running in terms of just all kinds of things. It's going to be quite a challenge, I think, to pull that off. So unless there's anything else, I will call us adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.